I'll never forget the way she laughed. Not the warm, accidental kind that sneaks out mid-sentence. This was calculated, cold, the kind of laugh that knows exactly where to land to cause maximum damage. It wasn't just disbelief, it was dismissal. Like my ambition was a joke she already heard a dozen times and never found funny. "You're doing what now?" my mom said, one manicured eyebrow arched, her voice teetering on the edge of ridicule. She wasn't curious, she was loading a bullet. "I'm launching my own branding consultancy," I told her. I remember how I'd sat a little straighter, holding my coffee with both hands to keep them from shaking. I was proud, God, I was proud, of the pitch deck I'd pulled together from scratch, of the 3 small clients I'd landed, of the long nights spent learning, building, risking. She sighed like I had told her I was moving to Mars. "You had a full ride to law school, Hannah. You could have been someone. Now you're playing pretend businesswoman on Instagram. Who's going to take you seriously?" She said it with that biting smile, the one she saved for family reunions when she told people I was doing a little online thing. That was 4 years ago. I was 30, living in a walk-up apartment in South Philly, barely able to afford heating, working 16-hour days on a second-hand Dell with a screen so dim I had to sit at the window for light. My office was a folding table between my fridge and the radiator. I used paper towels as makeshift whiteboards. My first logo was sketched in Sharpie, and still, I believed in what I was building. And every time something did go right, when a client referred a friend or when someone cried on Zoom because I helped them feel seen through their brand, I wanted to call her. Still, some pathetic, deeply buried reflex reaching for approval that never came, but she always found a way to twist it. "You got paid how much for just a logo? Seems like easy money. Do they know you didn't go to design school? Your website, I mean, it's cute. Kind of amateurish. Maybe hire someone next time. Don't you think it's time to stop chasing these childish dreams and get a real job? You're almost 31. It wasn't concern. It was contempt thinly veiled as maternal advice. The subtext was always the same. "You're embarrassing me." She couldn't see the vision. She couldn't see me. And yet, I kept trying. Not because I thought she'd change, but because some part of me, some stubborn, aching part, needed her to see me not just as her daughter, but as a woman she didn't make. A woman who chose herself, even when it meant walking away from the roadmap Deborah spent her life following. She wore her skepticism like armor, polished and inherited. To her, success was linear. Secure job, solid benefits, modest growth, early retirement. She couldn't fathom betting on yourself. She mistook uncertainty for failure. She mistook struggle for shame. But I wasn't ashamed. Not when I worked 80-hour weeks without complaining. Not when I designed pitch decks in Canva because I couldn't afford a dough. Not even when I cried after losing my first client, because those tears meant I cared, deeply. And no matter how many times she laughed, I never once stopped believing that I could make something real. Even if no one else believed it yet, especially her, I did. And that had to be enough. It wasn't the harshness of her words that cut the deepest. It was the readiness with which she spoke them, like she'd been rehearsing them, waiting for the moment I stepped even slightly out of line. A misstep, a mistake, a slow quarter, a client complaint. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" She asked, "Do you finally see I was right?" That's what stayed with me, that need, almost hunger, for my failure. Like every risk I took was an insult to the sacrifices she made. Like my success would somehow invalidate her life's choices, and so failure had to be the only outcome she allowed herself to see. It made me question things I once trusted in myself. I'd sit alone after delivering a project that had just gotten rave reviews from a client, but I couldn't hear their praise over the echo of her voice. Too flashy. Try hard. Unprofessional. Even when they were paying me double what I used to make in a whole month, I still found myself thinking, would Mom think this is real work? Would she even believe this was worth anything at all? That's the worst kind of doubt, the one you inherit. I used to think it was personal, that she just didn't believe in me. But the older I got, the clearer it became she didn't believe in possibility. Not anymore. Deborah spent 32 years working for the Philadelphia Department of Human Services. Every morning she got up at 5:45 sharp, applied her lipstick like armor, and laced up pumps that gave her blisters but made her feel presentable. She never missed a shift, never dared to dream sideways. She swallowed her resentment like pills, quiet, bitter, daily. And what did she get in return? A Thursday afternoon email saying her position was being restructured, an exit meeting with HR, a party with grocery store sheet cake and coworkers who didn't know her favorite color, and a plaque. Cheap metal on a wooden square that didn't even spell her name right. To Deborah. They gave her 32 years. She gave them her back, her knees, her peace of mind. And they sent her home with a pension too thin to smile about. That shattered something in her. But she never said it did. She just started talking more about playing it safe and less about the novels she once wanted to write. She started calling people foolish for quitting jobs as if dreaming was a disease. So when I told her I was launching a branding business, no investors, no guarantees, no corner office, she heard risk. She heard rebellion. She heard the ghost of everything she gave up. I tried to remember that. Tried to remind myself that her bitterness wasn't rooted in cruelty, but in disappointment, both in the world and quietly in herself. But even understanding the origin doesn't stop the sting. Because when it's your own mother trying to poke holes in your future, even when you're sure your boat can float, you start checking for leaks. And when you do that long enough, you forget how to sail. Letting go of her approval wasn't a single moment. It wasn't a line I crossed one day and never looked back. It was a slow, necessary unraveling. A release of tension I'd been carrying in my chest since I was old enough to understand that love and validation weren't always the same thing. I stopped crafting updates in my head that I thought might impress her. Stopped rehearsing explanations for why I was still doing that freelance thing. Stopped sending her client wins or press mentions, hoping she'd respond with more than a thumbs-up emoji or a warning about taxes. Instead, I turned my focus entirely to the people who actually saw me. To the clients who didn't care that I didn't have a fancy MBA or a last name that opened doors. They cared that I listened. That I understood what it meant to build something from the ground up with grit and borrowed time. I poured my heart into them. The Haitian bakery trying to rebrand after surviving a fire. The queer-owned coffee shop that needed to feel safe in its signage. The woman from Bogota who sold handmade jewelry online, who cried when she saw her new logo because for the first time, she said, it felt like her. These people weren't just clients. They were my proof. Proof that good work didn't need permission. The growth wasn't explosive. It wasn't viral. It was honest, organic, slow like trust, and just as powerful. By the end of my second year, I was able to hire my first employee, a copywriter who'd been laid off during the pandemic and brought soul into every tagline. A few months later, I brought on a junior designer, then a project manager. Eventually, I hired a creative director, Savannah, a powerhouse with a background in motion graphics and a voice that made clients feel like they'd already won. At 33, I signed my first six-figure contract. A tech startup in Austin wanted a complete overhaul and they chose me. Not because I had a Madison Avenue pedigree, but because I'd helped a local nail salon quadruple their traffic with nothing but color theory and authenticity. They flew me out twice a month, put me up in hotels with skyline views and sent Ubers to my door. It was during one of those rides back from the airport, tired but wired with that post-client adrenaline, that I saw it. An empty billboard, just off I-76, hovering over the expressway like a blank promise. It wasn't practical. It wasn't cheap. It made no sense from a conversion standpoint. But something stirred in me, deep and defiant. That space didn't need to be profitable. It needed to be loud. 2 weeks later, it was up. Bold white text on matte black. Small brands. Big impact. Designed by Hannah, the woman they laughed at. And beside it, my photo. No filters, no gimmicks, just me, in a blazer and a half smile, daring anyone to say I didn't belong. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming visibility. For every client who had been overlooked, for every woman who had been told no one will take you seriously, and for the girl I used to be, the one who still flinched when she heard her mother's voice in her head. That billboard wasn't for leads. It was for legacy. The phone rang just after 7:00 p.m. I almost didn't answer, figured it was spam or another client pushing a deadline. But when I saw Mom on the screen, something in me stilled. We hadn't spoken in weeks, maybe a month. Even after all the growth, all the press, all the wins, I had stopped trying to bring her into my world. It had been easier to keep that distance, quieter. I answered, "Hello." Her voice came in tight, like someone holding a breath they didn't know how to release. Was that you?" There was a split second of confusion before I caught up. "The billboard near the gas station. On I-76, she clarified, as if I might pretend not to know. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was caught off guard, but because I could feel the weight of this moment beginning to shift beneath us. "Yes," I said. "Why?" A long silence. Then, a soft exhale followed by a bewildered laugh, nervous, uncertain. I almost crashed my car. And for the first time in years, I smiled at something she said. It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't laced with superiority. She sounded stunned, like she walked into a museum and seen her child's artwork hanging in the main gallery without warning. She tried to recover, made a joke about how dramatic the billboard was, how I always did have a flair for the theatrical, but her voice didn't have the sharpness I'd grown used to. The edges were gone. She didn't sound amused. She sounded exposed. I stayed quiet, let her fumble her way through the moment. Not to be cruel, but because I was listening closely. What I heard under the surface wasn't mockery anymore. It was something softer. Maybe embarrassment. Maybe awe. Definitely surprise. Then came the words I never thought I'd hear from her. Words I'd long stopped hoping for. "I didn't realize it had gotten that big," she said quietly. "Your company, I mean." There was a kind of disbelief in her voice that couldn't be faked. And beneath it, something else, something like regret. I stared at the wall in front of me, trying to steady myself. I could have said a lot in that moment. I could have told her that it was always big, at least to me, that the work had always mattered, even when it didn't come with a paycheck or a title she could brag about to her friends. I could have told her that she only started looking when the proof was unmissable, when it stood 40 feet tall on a highway she couldn't avoid. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I simply said, "Thanks, Mom." Because even in that short sentence, I felt the tide shift. She didn't congratulate me outright, didn't apologize, but something in her voice had cracked just enough to let the light in. It wasn't vindication, not completely, but it was something. A beginning, maybe. And it had taken a billboard to get her to look up. She came on a Tuesday. No warning, no text. No, just thought I'd stop by. Just walked in quietly while we were already halfway through the workshop. Savannah noticed her first, gave me a soft nudge and a look. I turned, and there she was, Deborah, in her usual pressed slacks and button-down blouse, still clutching that leather handbag like armor, standing at the back of the room near the folding chairs, unsure if she should sit or vanish. For a moment, I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't flinch. Just let her exist in the same space as the thing she used to roll her eyes at. She stayed for the full 2 hours, watched me walk a group of 16-year-old girls through mood boards and logo mock-ups, helping them turn vague dreams into visible stories. Watched the way they looked at me, attentive, open, eager, as if every word I spoke was worth holding onto. She didn't speak, not even when the girls laughed at my caffeine-fueled jokes or gasped when I showed a before and after case study from a local restaurant we helped go viral. But I knew she was absorbing it. Not the content, necessarily, but the weight of it. The reality of what I'd built. After the girls left, and the room was filled only with the sound of markers being capped and chairs scraping across the tile, she walked over. Her face was unreadable. That was her superpower, wearing nothing on her sleeve. But her eyes were softer than I remembered. "You're helping people," she said quietly. No preamble, no sarcasm. I turned toward her, waiting. She paused, exhaled, and said it raw, unpracticed. "And I see they respect you." I'm sorry, Hannah. I thought you were chasing nothing." It didn't feel like a grand gesture. It wasn't a Hallmark moment with tears and background music. It felt human, flawed, real. Like it took her everything to form those words. And in that moment, something in me unlocked. Not because I needed her to say it, but because I'd spent so long imagining she never would. I didn't cry, didn't roll out years of hurt, didn't shove the past between us like a wall of receipts. Instead, I hugged her. Not because I was desperate for closeness, not because it undid the years of silence and skepticism, but because it felt good to be seen, fully seen, by the one person whose blindness once hurt the most. She stood there for a second too long in that hug, like she wasn't sure what to do with the version of me in her arms. The one who hadn't become a lawyer. The one who hadn't chosen the steady path. The one who made something out of what she called nothing. And I realized then, that billboard wasn't what changed her. I was. That room full of girls, that energy, that purpose. She saw the world I had crafted with my own hands. Saw the lives being changed, mine included, and finally understood. I didn't need her to validate my success, but it was a quiet triumph to watch her recognize it. To stand tall in the light of everything she once doubted. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first time she saw her daughter not as a mistake, but as a woman who'd made her own way.